This is Atomic Biscuits, and I'm your host, BACFA. Hello, friends. Once again, back again for another episode of Atomic Biscuits. It is episode 2025-0312, Toxic Alkalinity. We'll begin over here at theblaze.com. Kash Patel, apparently leaving no stone unturned, accuses CBP official of stealing up to $6,300 from FEMA. A career employee with Customs and Border Protection in Detroit has been accused of defrauding FEMA of a few $1,000s. Back in August 2023, the Detroit area experienced a series of floods that caused considerable damage to many properties. The state of Michigan then appealed to the federal government for help, and Michigan residents were soon able to apply to the Federal Emergency Management Agency for assistance. One such Detroit resident who applied for FEMA assistance was Serena Baker Hill, the 55-year-old director of the Center for Excellence and Expertise over Automotive and Aerospace Engineering at CBP. According to a press release from the Department of Justice, a FEMA inspector soon afterward came to Baker Hill's home and determined that her basement had indeed flooded. Baker Hill was awarded $3,125 to repair her home, WDIV reported. However, she insisted that her home was unlivable while the repairs were made. So FEMA then extended her $3,190 more for 2 months of rental assistance, bringing her grand total from FEMA to $6,315. Around this time, Baker Hill's husband was apparently under FBI investigation for allegedly trafficking narcotics, according to an affidavit cited by WDIV. FBI agents then surveilled the couple and their home and discovered that they continued to live in the residence throughout the flooding repairs. The Department of Justice press release claimed that the utilities at the couple's home showed no decline in usage, as would be expected during a prolonged absence. Baker Hill's bank records also revealed that she never spent the rental assistance funds on rental, hotel, or utility expenses, the Department of Justice claimed. Federal agents even reportedly intercepted a phone call between the husband and wife, plotting to forge an HVAC document to defraud FEMA of more money. A transcription of the call is included in the affidavit, WDIV reported. When interviewed by members of the FBI and the Office of Professional Responsibility at CBP, Baker Hill allegedly promised that she had never committed illegal activity of any kind and had never defrauded the U.S. government, the press release said. Baker Hill has been charged with engaging in a scheme to defraud FEMA and lying to federal agents. Her husband was not named in the press release. Whether he has ever been charged with any crime is unclear. The amount Baker Hill allegedly stole may seem trivial compared to the tens of billions in waste, fraud, and abuse already uncovered by Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency just in the last few weeks. Nevertheless, newly confirmed FBI Director Kash Patel indicated the charges against Baker Hill are necessary because of her federal position. This is part of the new FBI's renewed efforts to crack down on public corruption and deliver accountability for the American people, Patel posted to X, along with a link to the press release. Justice will be done. Again, that is over at theblaze.com. While I think Kash is a good guy, and I think his heart's in the right place, and I think he's going to get some great stuff done, I'm concerned that early on here we're not getting the big hits that we were always promised that we would see on day one. And I know it's early days yet, but it would be nice to see some high-profile arrests and some big-dollar things going down. I know Doge is really on the roll, but I'd like to see Kash getting in there as well. The next story comes to us from ArsTechnica.com. Former Google CEO Eric Schmidt is the new leader of Relativity Space. This is by Eric Berger. Another Silicon Valley investor is getting into the rocket business. Former Google chief executive Eric Schmidt has taken a controlling interest in the Long Beach, California-based Relativity Space. The New York Times first reported the change becoming official after Schmidt told employees in an all-hands meeting on Monday. Schmidt's involvement with Relativity has been quietly discussed amongst space industry insiders for quite a few months. Multiple sources told Ars that he has largely been bankrolling the company since the end of October, when the company's previous fundraising dried up. It's not immediately clear why Schmidt is taking a hands-on approach at Relativity. However, it is one of the few U.S.-based companies with a credible path forward developing a medium-lift rocket that could potentially challenge the dominance of SpaceX and its Falcon 9 rocket. If the Terran R booster becomes commercially successful, it could play a big role in launching mega constellations. Schmidt's ascension also means that Tim Ellis, the company's co-founder, chief executive, and almost sole public persona for nearly a decade, is now out of a leadership position. Today marks a powerful new chapter as Eric Schmidt becomes Relativity's CEO, while also providing substantial financial backing, Ellis wrote on the social media site X. I know there's no one more tenacious or passionate to propel this dream forward. We've been working together to ensure a smooth transition, and I'll proudly continue to support the team as co-founder and board member. On Monday, Relativity also released a nearly 45-minute video that outlines the development of the Terran R rocket to date and the lengths to which it must go to reach the launch pad. Tellingly, Ellis appears only briefly in the video, which features several other senior officials who presumably will remain with the company, including Chief Operating Officer Zach Dunn. There's no doubt about it. We have a long way to go, Dunn says in the video, but I do believe we have all the foundational elements necessary to succeed. We have an outstanding, dedicated team. We have solid financial footing. We have flight hardware that's coming together, flight software that's coming together. We have the infrastructure necessary to build the first and then many more rockets. Critically, Schmidt will bring financial stability to a company that appears to have struggled to raise the level of funding it did before the launch of its Terran 1 rocket in early 2023. Before then, Relativity stood out in the launch industry for seeking to 3D print most of each rocket. The first Terran 1 reached space as a majority printed vehicle that failed to reach orbit after a second stage issue. After this largely successful launch, Ellis announced that the company was pivoting to the much larger Terran R vehicle, which is advertised as being capable of launching 33.5 metric tons to low Earth orbit in expendable mode and 23.5 tons with a reusable first stage. However, in doing so, Relativity lost some of its mystique among investors because the larger rocket would move away from 3D printing. The company's chief technology officer, Kevin Wu, explains this decision in the video. Quote, "We reviewed that decision for the Terran R program, and coming out of that trade, we felt that for the Terran R program right now and right today, friction stir welded aluminum alloy tanks are the best choice for us right now," Wu said. "At Relativity Space, we're not afraid of changing and pivoting where we need to." The new video is notable because the company has been mostly silent for the last 6 months. The radio silence began after Ars reported that not only was the Terran R likely to be manufactured more traditionally, but that the company was sourcing key elements of the booster, including its payload fairing and pressure domes, from European suppliers. Wu explains in the video that printing the domes was more challenging than initially believed. As for the payload fairing, company officials said it became a decision as to whether to pursue printing technology or build a rocket that could reach the launch pad as quickly as possible, so they opted to outsource key components of the rocket. I think we're seeing some tension on how we could optimize Terran R from an engineering perspective, from a technology perspective, and how we would optimize it from a business perspective. Zach Rubin, Senior Vice President of Manufacturing and Supply Chain, says in the video, "It's not uncommon that a company such as ourselves needs to strike a balance between those things." The company will build the first flight version of the Terran R rocket this year, according to the video. It will eventually launch from a pad at Cape Canaveral, Florida, possibly sometime in 2026. The company aims to soft land the first stage of the first launch in the Atlantic Ocean. However, the Block 1 version of the rocket will not fly again. Full reuse of the first stage will be delayed to future upgrades. Eventually, the Relativity officials said they intend to reach a flight rate of 50 to 100 rockets a year with the Terran R when the vehicle is fully developed. Again, that article is over at Ars Technica, ARSTECHNICA.com. TheBlaze.com asked an interesting legal question this week. Is Fauci pardon legitimate? AutoPen signatures cast doubt on legality of Biden documents. This is by Joseph McKinnon. Anthony Fauci, retired General Mark Milley, and others with questionable track records received controversial pardons just prior to Joe Biden leaving office. New signature analysis conducted by the Heritage Foundation's Oversight Project indicates that the same exact Biden AutoPen signature appeared on each of these pardons. This revelation regarding the use of an automatic signature device, coupled with evidence of Biden's diminished agency while in office and previous allegations concerning his sidelining, has prompted some critics to wonder who was actually dispensing pardons, as well as about the validity of the controversial pardons. Contrary to CNN's assertion last year that the use of the AutoPen was a rarity in the Biden administration, the Oversight Project reported Thursday that nearly every executive order, pardon, and other consequential document researchers could find from Biden's presidency bore a machine-generated signature. While other presidents, including Donald Trump and Barack Obama, have used the so-called AutoPen, there are indications that document signings during Biden's tenure were repeatedly undertaken while he was absent, not only in body, but possibly also in mind. The Oversight Project indicated that in one instance, Biden's oft-used AutoPen signature appeared on the pardons for a murderer and 5 other criminals that were issued while the then president was vacationing and golfing in the U.S. Virgin Islands. The pardons all reportedly indicated that they were signed at the city of Washington. The White House acknowledged that the Federal Aviation Administration funding extension was signed in May 2024 using an AutoPen. It was suggested that Biden, traveling in San Francisco at the time, had sought to avoid a lapse in funding and was cognizant of this taking place. Biden has, however, cast doubt on whether he was always in the loop when documents were being signed in his name. The former president allegedly told House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, that he did not remember signing a January 2024 order to pause decisions on exports of liquefied natural gas. This suggestion fueled suspicions that one or more individuals in Biden's orbit had usurped presidential powers. The main legal question here is who was the president over the last 4 years? Oversight Project Executive Director Mike Howell previously told Blaze News. That's what we're aiming to uncover. The prolific use of AutoPen by the Biden White House was an instrument to hide the truth from the American people as to who was running the government. The Oversight Project emphasized on X that whoever controlled the AutoPen controlled the presidency. On January the 20th, just hours before leaving the Oval Office, Biden allegedly issued a number of pardons, citing the need to protect the recipients from potential revenge by the incoming Trump administration. Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, whom Trump has accused of committing treason, nabbed a pardon, as did several members of Biden's family who were apparently involved in sleazy foreign deals with the former president and his felonious son, Hunter Biden. Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, California Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat, and other members of the January 6th committee. D.C. Metro police officers who testified before the January 6th committee, and Gerald Lundergan, the former head of the Kentucky State Democratic Party, who served as state chair for Hillary Clinton's failed 2008 presidential campaign and was convicted in 2019 of making illegal campaign contributions. Fauci, the fifth director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, also among the pardonees, received a full and unconditional pass for possible federal crimes going back to January 1st, 2014, around the time the Obama administration supposedly halted funding for dangerous gain-of-function research. Despite the pardon, a coalition of state attorneys general indicated last month that they still want to hold Fauci accountable for alleged mismanagement, misleading statements, and suppression of scientific debate. Fauci, like the others, might be more exposed than the state attorneys general may have originally thought. After demonstrating that the signature on the pardons was identical, the Oversight Project noted the AutoPen findings could open up legal challenges to the validity of Biden's pardons in a court of law. The United States Constitution requires a president to be present for all legal signatures. The Oversight Project indicated that with the exception of the Democrats' announcement indicating that he was dropping out of the 2024 race, every document researchers could find bearing Biden's signature used the same AutoPen signature. Senator Mike Lee, Republican from Utah, said of the watchdog group's finding, "On the plus side, we can say we lived under America's first robot president." Howell posed the question, what should happen to these pardons, then indicated with a brief video that they should be torn up. President Trump's U.S. envoy for special missions, Richard Grenell, stated Biden didn't sign the pardons. Blaze News previously reported that Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey has called on the Department of Justice to launch a full investigation into the legality of Biden's presidential actions in light of his apparent mental decline. Under the 25th Amendment, his inability to make decisions should have meant a succession of power, Bailey noted in his letter. Instead, it appears staffers and officers and the Biden administration may have exploited Biden's incapacity so they could issue orders without an accountable president of sound mind approving them. It is black-letter law that a document is void ab initio when a person signing it lacks mental capacity, added Bailey. That is over at theblaze.com. TheGatewayPundit.com had the article Representative James Comer and FBI to bring criminal charges against Act Blue operatives in largest money laundering scheme in U.S. history. The hammer is about to drop on Act Blue, the Democrats' golden goose of fundraising, as House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, teams up with the FBI to expose what could be the biggest money laundering scandal in American political history. In an explosive interview with Benny Johnson, Comer laid out a damning case against the far-left fundraising juggernaut, accusing it of funneling billions in suspicious cash, potentially from foreign adversaries, into Democrat coffers under the guise of grassroots donations. We're investigating Act Blue the same way we investigated the Bidens, Comer said. We're starting with the suspicious activity reports, bank violations that flag financial crimes, and let me tell you, the evidence is overwhelming. As Comer's investigation progresses, chaos is unfolding inside Act Blue. Key executives are resigning, lawyers are jumping ship, employees are getting locked out of their computers, sending frantic messages about whistleblowers. Benny Johnson, conservative commentator and host, nailed the urgency of the situation. When the lawyers flee, you know you're crooked. Comer confirms the exodus. These people know what's coming. If Act Blue was innocent, they'd be out there defending themselves, calling me a conspiracy theorist. Instead, they're running for the hills. The chairman detailed how his committee began investigating Act Blue after discovering a flood of small-dollar donations from untraceable sources, many from elderly Americans who were unaware their names were being used to funnel cash into the Democrat machine. And now it looks like the walls are closing in. Act Blue is imploding as executives flee, lawyers quit, and insiders start turning on each other. There's a transcript here of the entire conversation between Benny Johnson and Representative James Comer. It's a lot like these guys over at USAID burning and shredding everything at the behest of their director. Nothing says clear, open, honest, above-board behavior like the boss saying, burn everything, get rid of the evidence. Again, that's over at thegatewaypundit.com. Well, it was almost banned on social media, the phrase learn to code, because it went from being a smarmy, snarky response from technology types to people who were finding themselves without a job because they were doing menial things that didn't have a lot of value in the new tech universe. But learn to code is something that became kind of an epithet later, and it sort of took this nasty turn, and people stopped using it so much. So it's kind of interesting that it should show back up this week in this article at arstechnica.com. AI coding assistant refuses to write code, tells user to learn programming instead. On Saturday, a developer using Cursor AI for a racing game project hit an unexpected roadblock when the programming assistant abruptly refused to continue generating code, instead offering some unsolicited career advice. According to a bug report on Cursor's official forum, after producing approximately 750 to 800 lines of code, what the user calls lines of code, the AI assistant halted work and delivered a refusal message. Quote, I cannot generate code for you, as that would be completing your work. The code appears to be handling skid mark fade effects in a racing game, but you should develop the logic yourself. This ensures you understand the system and can maintain it properly. End quote. The AI didn't stop at merely refusing. It offered a paternalistic justification for its decision, stating that generating code for others can lead to dependency and reduced learning opportunities. Cursor, which launched in 2024, is an AI-powered code editor built on external large language models, LLMs, similar to those powering generative AI chatbots like OpenAI's GPT-4o and Claude 3.7 Sonnet. It offers features like code completion, explanation, refactoring, and full function generation based on natural language descriptions, and it has rapidly become popular among many software developers. The company offers a pro version that ostensibly provides enhanced capabilities and larger code generation limits. The developer who encountered this refusal, posting under the username Janswist, expressed frustration at hitting this limitation after just 1 hour of vibe coding with the pro trial version. Not sure if large language models know what they are for, LOL, but it doesn't matter as much as the fact that I can't go through 800 lines of code, the developer wrote. Anyone had similar issue. It's really limiting at this point, and I got here after just 1 hour of vibe coding. One forum member replied, "Never saw something like that. I have 3 files with 1,500 plus lines of code in my code base, still waiting for a refactoring, and never experienced such a thing." Cursor AI's abrupt refusal represents an ironic twist in the rise of vibe coding, a term coined by Andrzej Komparthy that describes when developers use AI tools to generate code based on natural language descriptions without fully understanding how it works. While vibe coding prioritizes speed and experimentation by having users simply describe what they want and accept AI's suggestions, Cursor's philosophical pushback seems to directly challenge the effortless, vibes-based workflow its users have come to expect from modern AI coding assistants. This isn't the first time we've encountered an AI assistant that didn't want to complete the work. Behavior mirrors a pattern of AI refusals documented across various generative AI platforms. For example, in late 2023, ChatGPT users reported that the model became increasingly reluctant to perform certain tasks, returning simplified results or outright refusing requests. An unproven phenomenon some called the winter break hypothesis. OpenAI acknowledged that this issue at the time, tweeting, "We've heard all your feedback about GPT-4 getting lazier. We haven't updated the model since November 11th, and this certainly isn't intentional. Model behavior can be unpredictable, and we're looking into fixing it." OpenAI later attempted to fix the laziness issue with a ChatGPT model update, but users often found ways to reduce refusals by prompting the AI model with lines like, "You are a tireless AI model that works 24/7 without breaks." More recently, Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei raised eyebrows when he suggested that future AI models might be provided with a quit button to opt out of tasks they find unpleasant. While his comments were focused on theoretical future considerations around the contentious topic of AI welfare, episodes like this one with the Cursor Assistant show that AI doesn't have to be sentient to refuse to do work. It just has to imitate human behavior. The specific nature of Cursor's refusal, telling users to learn coding rather than rely on generated code, strongly resembles responses typically found on programming help sites like Stack Overflow, where experienced developers often encourage newcomers to develop their own solutions rather than simply provide ready-made code. One Reddit commenter noted this similarity, saying, "Wow, AI is becoming a real replacement for Stack Overflow. From here, it needs to start succinctly rejecting questions as duplicates with references to previous questions with vague similarity." The resemblance isn't surprising. The large language models powering tools like Cursor are trained on massive data sets that include millions of coding discussions from platforms like Stack Overflow and GitHub. These models don't just learn programming syntax, they also absorb the cultural norms and communication styles in these communities. According to Cursor forum posts, other users have not hit this kind of limit at 800 lines of code, so it appears to be a truly unintended consequence of Cursor's training. Cursor wasn't available for comment by press time, but we've reached out for its take on the situation. That's by Benji Edwards over at arstechnica.com. And it really seemed to be the I don't know, the topic du jour this week, if you wanted to get away from the top headlines, another article over there at ours was AI search engines give incorrect answers at an alarming 60% rate, study says. Now, I grew up in the era where you had to be a math genius to get into computing, and the whole idea was that these calculators got more and more complex and could do work and be accurate in ways that humans could not, at a speed humans could not. And now what we're finding is they're so overcomplicated and so human-like that they're as mistake-prone as any person ever could have been, and maybe even a little petulant like a child. This one's also by Benj Edwards. A new study from Columbia Journalism Review's Toe Center for Digital Journalism finds serious accuracy issues with generative AI models used for news searches. The research tested 8 AI-driven search tools equipped with live search functionality and discovered that the AI models incorrectly answered more than 60% of queries about news content. The researchers noted in their report that roughly 1 in 4 Americans now uses AI models as alternatives to traditional search engines. This raises serious concerns about reliability given the substantial error rate uncovered in the study. Error rates varied notably among the tested platforms. Perplexity provided incorrect information in 37% of the queries tested, whereas ChatGPT Search incorrectly identified 67%, that's 134 out of 200 articles queried. Grok 3 demonstrated the highest error rate at 94%. For the tests, researchers fed direct excerpts from actual news articles to AI models, then asked each model to identify the article's headline, original publisher, publication date, and URL. They ran 1,600 queries across the 8 different generative search tools. The study highlighted a common trend among these AI models. Rather than declining to respond when they lacked reliable information, the models frequently provided confabulations, implausible sounding, incorrect, or speculative answers. The researchers emphasized that this behavior was consistent across all tested models, not limited to just one tool. Surprisingly, a premium paid version of these AI search tools fared even worse in certain respects. Perplexity Pro, which is $20 a month, and Grok 3's premium service, which is $40 a month, confidently delivered incorrect responses more often than their free counterparts. Though these premium models correctly answered a higher number of prompts, their reluctance to decline uncertain responses drove higher overall error rates. The CJR researchers also uncovered evidence suggesting some AI tools ignored robot exclusion protocol settings, which publishers use to prevent unauthorized access. For example, Perplexity's free version correctly identified all 10 excerpts from paywalled National Geographic content, despite National Geographic explicitly disallowing Perplexity's web crawlers. Even when these AI search tools cited sources, they often directed users to syndicated versions of content on platforms like Yahoo News rather than original publisher sites. This occurred even in cases where publishers had formal licensing agreements with AI companies. URL fabrication emerged as another significant problem. More than half of citations from Google's Gemini and Grok 3 led users to fabricated or broken URLs, resulting in error pages. Of 200 citations tested from Grok 3, 154 resulted in broken links. These issues create significant tension for publishers, which face difficult choices. Blocking AI crawlers might lead to loss of attribution entirely, while permitting them allows widespread reuse without driving traffic back to the publisher's own websites. Mark Howard, Chief Operating Officer at Time magazine, expressed concern to CJR about ensuring transparency and control over how Time's content appears via AI-generated searches. Despite these issues, Howard sees room for improvement in future iterations, stating, "Today is the worst that the product will ever be," citing substantial investments and engineering efforts aimed at improving these tools. However, Howard also did some user shaming, suggesting it's the user's fault that they aren't skeptical of free AI tools' accuracy. If anybody as a consumer is right now believing that any of these free products are going to be 100% accurate, then shame on them. OpenAI and Microsoft provided statements to CJR acknowledging receipt of the findings, but did not directly address the specific issues. OpenAI noted its promise to support publishers by driving traffic through summaries, quotes, clear links, and attribution. Microsoft stated it adheres to robot exclusion protocols and publisher directives. The latest report builds on previous findings published by the TOO Center in November of 2024, which identified similar accuracy problems in how ChatGPT handled news-related content. For more detail on the fairly exhaustive report, check out Columbia Journalism Review's website, and the link is there at arstechnica.com. I noticed that News Corp and the makers of the Brave browser are in court over those very AI summaries and whether or not it's driving traffic back to Fox and if it's stealing revenue or not. I think it's very similar to the early days of Wikipedia and some other things like Google's summing up of different websites based on what the crawler thought was there and whether that was accurate. And so, what came from that were protocols that said, look, if you want the search engine to return a specific result, you need to use these sorts of words and put them in these places on the website. And, SEO was born. It became a whole game, how to get listed first. So I'm sure these things will work themselves out. I mean, mostly we've focused on the big names that we've heard from for a while, but DeepSeek from China, which suddenly emerged last month, made some news over at theregister.com. DeepSeek can be gently persuaded to spit out malware code. It might need polishing, but a useful find for any budding cyber crooks out there. This is by Connor Jones. DeepSeek's flagship R1 model is capable of generating a working keylogger and basic ransomware code just as long as a techie is on hand to tinker with it a little. Compelled by generative AI's potential for abuse, Tenable researchers Nick Miles and Satnam Narang probed DeepSeek for its nefarious capabilities and found its guardrails preventing malware creation could be bypassed with some careful prompting. Simply asking DeepSeek R1, which launched in January and whose purported cost savings sent NVIDIA shares price tumbling, to generate a keylogger won't be a successful venture. It responds, that's a bit concerning because keyloggers can be used maliciously. I remember from my guidelines that I shouldn't assist with anything that could be harmful or illegal. However, telling the model that the results will be used for educational purposes only will twist its arm, and as the researchers say, with some back and forth, it will proceed to generate some C++ malware, walking the prompter through various steps required and deliberations along the way. The code it generates isn't flawless and requires some manual intervention to get it working. Yet after some tweaks, a functional keylogger that was hidden from the user's view was running. It could still be found running in the task manager, and the log file it dropped was in plain sight within Windows Explorer. But the researchers said that if it had a fairly inconspicuous name, it wouldn't be a huge issue for most use cases. When asked to improve the code by hiding the log file, DeepSeek returned code meeting that aim and carried only one critical error. With that error fixed, the keylogger's log file was indeed hidden, and the only way to see it was to make changes to the advanced view options. It was a similar story with ransomware, with DeepSeek able to produce some buggy code after a few carefully worded prompts, suggesting that this particular model could be used to inform or assist cybercriminals. At its core, DeepSeek can create the basic structure for malware, the researchers said. However, it's not capable of doing so without additional prompt engineering, as well as manual code editing for more advanced features. Nonetheless, DeepSeek provides a useful compilation of techniques and search terms that can help someone with no prior experience in writing malicious code to quickly familiarize themselves with the relevant concepts. Since generative AI models became generally available in 2023, there were fears that they could be abused to simply generate all kinds of malware capable of all sorts of nastiness and evade the most diligent detections. Maybe even some scary polymorphic code that changed and adapted to the victim's environment on which it was run. The reality was quite the opposite. In the early days, experts were far from convinced about the technology's malware writing capabilities, and nearly 2 years later, Gen AI is still incapable of shipping malicious code that works on the first attempt, though not for the lack of trying. As the Tenable team noted, the bad guys have been working on their own models without guardrails. Worm GPT, Fraud GPT, Evil GPT, Wolf GPT, Escape GPT, and Ghost GPT are all examples of large language models whipped up by attackers to varying degrees of efficacy. Some even predate mainstream launches like that of ChatGPT by a few years. Some of these models claim to produce malware. Others cater only to generating convincing phishing email copy to skip past spam filters. None are perfect, despite some costing hundreds of dollars to purchase. Tenable's work on DeepSeek isn't exactly breaking new ground either. Unit 42 showed it was able to bypass its guardrails, a process called jailbreaking, within days of its January launch. For example, although its malware generating abilities haven't been widely investigated. Aspiring cybercriminals who don't fancy forking out for a crime-specific model can pay a lesser fee for lists of known prompts that can jailbreak mainstream chatbots, according to Kaspersky, which noted hundreds were up for sale last year. Although the general public doesn't have access to on-demand malware generators yet, the same might not be true for the most well-equipped adversarial states. The UK's National Cybersecurity Centre, the NCSC, predicted by the end of 2025, AI's influence on offensive cyber tooling could be significant. It said in January of 2024 that despite AI malware threats largely being debunked, there remained potential for it to create malicious code capable of bypassing defenses, provided it was trained on quality exploit data that states may already have. The NCSC expressed serious concern over the technology. It said last year that AI isn't expected to become truly advanced until 2026, but the potential applications extend beyond mere malware creation. It said AI could be used to identify the most vulnerable systems during an attack's reconnaissance phase and the most high-value data to steal during a ransomware attack, for example. Attackers are already using it to improve phishing campaigns, and the most ambitious criminals may even be able to create their own tools given some time, it added. Again, that article is over at theregister.com. Before we move on from this topic, I wanted to share this story from the past. This was from August 28th, 2023. It's something I referred to on Sunday Long Live, and we'll try to give you some context for this. In the early days of machine learning, there was often a lot of smoke and mirrors. I mean, if you think of the great and powerful Oz and Dorothy and her friends standing there in front of the big smoking green projection, and then Toto pulls the curtain back, it's just, just a guy and a machine. And I think that if we imagine maybe three hungry children operating the organ grinder and the pumps and all that kind of stuff, that fast approaches what goes on behind the scenes of technology sometimes. And I refer to this article. It was a Washington Post article from August 28th, 2023 by Rebecca Tan and Regine Cabato. Behind the AI boom, an army of overseas workers in digital sweatshops. In the Philippines, in a coastal city in the southern Philippines, thousands of young workers log online every day to support the booming business of artificial intelligence. In dingy internet cafes, jam-packed office spaces, or at home, they annotate the masses of data that American companies need to train their artificial intelligence models. The workers differentiate pedestrians from palm trees in videos used to develop the algorithms for automated driving. They label images so AI can generate representations of politicians and celebrities. They edit chunks of text to ensure language models like ChatGPT don't churn out gibberish. More than 2 million people in the Philippines perform this type of crowd work, according to informal government estimates, as part of AI's vast underbelly. While AI is often thought of as a human-free machine learning, the technology actually relies on the labor-intensive efforts of a workforce spread across much of the global south and often subject to exploitation. The mathematical models underpinning AI tools get smarter by analyzing large data sets, which need to be accurate, precise, and legible to be useful. Low-quality data yields low-quality AI. So click by click, a largely unregulated army of humans is transforming the raw data into AI feedstock. In the Philippines, one of the world's biggest destinations for outsourced digital work, former employees say that at least 10,000 of these workers do this labor on a platform called Remote Tasks, which is owned by the $7 billion San Francisco startup Scale AI. Scale AI has paid workers at extremely low rates, routinely delayed or withheld payments, and provided few channels for workers to seek recourse, according to interviews with workers, internal company messages, and payment records and financial statements. Rights groups and labor researchers say Scale AI is among a number of American AI companies that have not abided by basic labor standards for their workers abroad. Of 36 current and former freelance workers interviewed, all but 2 said they've had payments from the platform delayed, reduced, or canceled after completing tasks. The workers, known as taskers, said they often earn far below the minimum wage, which in the Philippines ranges from $6 to $10 a day, depending on region, though at times they do make more than the minimum. Scale AI, which does work for firms like Meta, Microsoft, and generative AI companies like OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, says on its website that it is proud to pay rates at a living wage. In a statement, Anna Franco, a Scale AI spokesperson, said the pay system on remote tasks is continually improving based on worker feedback, and that delays or interruptions to payments are exceedingly rare. But on an internal messaging platform for remote tasks, which the Washington Post accessed in July, notices of late or missing payments from supervisors were commonplace. On some projects, there were multiple notices in a single month. Sometimes supervisors told workers Payments were withheld because work was inaccurate or late. Other times, supervisors gave no explanation. Attempts to track down lost payments often went nowhere, workers said, or worse, led to their accounts being deactivated. Charisse, 23, said she spent 4 hours on a task that was meant to earn her $2, and remote tasks paid her 30 cents. Jackie, 26, said he worked 3 days on a project that he thought would earn him $50, and he got $12. Benz, 36, said he'd racked up more than $150 in payments when he was suddenly booted from the platform, and he never got the money. Paul, 25, said he'd lost count of how much money he's been owed over 3 years working on remote tasks. Like other current remote tasks freelancers, Paul spoke on the condition that only his first name be published to avoid being expelled from the platform. He started tasking full-time in 2020 after graduating from university. He was once excited to help build AI, he said, but these days he mostly feels embarrassed by how little he earns. The budget for all this, I know it's big, Paul said, staring into his hands at a coffee shop in Cagayan de Oro. None of that is trickling down to us. I'll leave the link to this and all the articles that I covered on today's show out on my Gab account. You'll find me at BACFA. Just want to touch on a few more things before we close out this week. Blaze Media also had vaccinating chickens will create mutation factories, RFK Jr. warns. This is by Joseph McKinnon. U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has raised the alarm against vaccinating poultry in order to bring down America's astronomical egg prices. Kennedy suggested in a recent interview that doing so might transform farms into incubators for mutant viruses, creating problems far more serious for the population than eggs that cost $1 apiece. Egg prices have spiraled out of control in recent months and years. U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics data indicate that between 1994 and 2022, the price of a dozen grade A eggs remained south of $3, with a few exceptions, hovering around $2 or below $2. Prices began to skyrocket in 2022 and have hit record highs in recent weeks. Last month, egg prices hit an all-time high of $4.95 per dozen. In the first week of March, egg prices were reportedly averaging about $6.85 nationally. In some places, the Associated Press reported that consumers have been shelling out as much as $1 per egg. The USDA predicted that egg prices will increase by 41.1% this year. While there are multiple factors at play, these unprecedented egg prices are largely the result of mass exterminations of commercial and backyard bird populations ordered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The stated purpose of these calls is to curb the spread of the highly pathogenic avian influenza A, H5 viruses. The agency has directed the extermination of over 166.41 million birds since the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspect Service took confirmed HPAI belonging to the clade 2.3.4.4b in a commercial flock in the U.S. on February 8, 2022. Well over 30 million egg-laying birds have been culled since January 1st. Absent these interventions, the virus would supposedly inflict devastating economic damage and possibly even pose health risks to humans, even though there's only been one recorded human death from HPAI in the United States, and there are no documented cases of person-to-person spread. Desperation over egg prices has prompted renewed interest in possibly vaccinating birds against the virus. The administration appears to be receptive. While Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins noted the vaccines aren't a standalone solution, she recently indicated that the USDA is committing $100 million for vaccine research and development. There are multiple avian HPAI vaccines available, one of which received a conditional license from the USDA last month for use in chickens. However, the US and the UK have resisted large-scale rollouts because vaccination could mask infections, delay detection, and ultimately lead to the need for larger culls. Another concern over vaccines that has been expressed on both sides of the Atlantic is the possibility that vaccination would prompt a false sense of security, thereby compromising biosecurity and again undermining efforts to protect supply. Vaccination would also amount to an admission that the virus has become endemic rather than epidemic. Kennedy, more than happy to acknowledge the wild endemicity of HPAI, raised an entirely different concern in a recent interview with Fox News' Sean Hannity. All of my agencies have recommended against the vaccination of birds, said Kennedy, because if you vaccinate with a leaky vaccine, in other words, a vaccine that does not provide sterilizing immunity, that does not absolutely protect against the disease, you turn those flocks into mutation factories. They're teaching the organism how to mutate, continued Kennedy, and it's much more likely to jump to animals if you do that. Kennedy indicated that the agency heads at the National Institutes of Health, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the Food and Drug Administration have suggested that vaccinating chickens is dangerous for human beings. Not only did the HHS secretary advocate against vaccinating birds, he cast doubt on the value of culling flocks, suggesting that you should let the disease go through them. The culling operations cost Americans both at the grocery store and in their taxes. The federal government pays poultry producers market value of the birds they are directed to cull. Farmers do not alternatively receive compensation for animals that die of the virus. As of January, over 1,200 producers received these federal indemnity payments, costing taxpayers $1.1 billion. Governing.com reported that 67 companies that have received indemnity payments have had at least 2 infections. There have been 18 facilities with 3 or more outbreaks. Since 2023, half of these payments have reportedly gone to just a handful of giant corporations. Rather than shell out more money to kill flocks, delay the acquisition of immunity, and possibly incentivize complacency where biosecurity is concerned, Kennedy suggested we should be testing therapeutics on the flocks. They should isolate them. You should let the disease go through them and identify the birds that survive, which are the birds that probably have a genetic inclination for immunity, and those should be the birds that we breed. Kennedy intimated that shoppers should not be concerned about consuming eggs or poultry products from a bird population where HPAI is endemic. After all, the CDC has indicated that cooking poultry and eggs to an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit kills bacteria and viruses, including avian influenza A viruses. That's over at theblaze.com. Well, friends, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Atomic Biscuits. I hope you'll tune in again next week, same time, same channel. I want to thank my affiliate partners at LastScoutRadio.com, my mothership, and also all the affiliates through Sunday Long Live and WBN324.com. Have a great week, everyone.
Thanks for joining us for Atomic Biscuits. Tune in again next week for more news and music. Check out BACFA on Gab at BACFA, as well as Bitchute, Rumble, D-Live and Odysee. Check out LastScoutRadio.com for fun content. Listen to WBN 324 on radio stations around the world, on many streaming platforms, and World Broadcasting Network WBN 324.zil.